Hello, I'm Filip Pogády, and you're watching Living the Classical Life.
Filip, thank you so much for being back on Living the Classical Life. It's such a delight to welcome you.
Thank you, Joel, for having me. Always
Okay.
a pleasure.
So we have an interesting opportunity here because we, in fact, did film you on the show already. I think, was it 6 years ago?
Yes, it was 6 years ago. I should look it up before I got here.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you know it better than I did. We filmed you back when you were still a student, and
I was actually fresh out of school at
you
the
were
time.
fresh out of
Yes.
school. And so the opportunity here is to trace a little bit about the trajectory that you've found since that time, because a lot of the audience we are trying to reach is the student in conservatory right now. They're about to graduate or they've graduated and they're thinking, what happens next?
Yes.
And I think what's really fascinating is the diverse way in which you have reached your audiences now. The first thing that I'll start out with is you have an incredible social media following. What was the story there? How did you start that?
I didn't start it consciously, actually. It just happened. And once I saw a certain momentum, I kept going at it. I think that's how it really happened. I started posting, first I was a complete anti-social media kind of person.
Really?
I didn't have an Instagram for a very long time. And it's funny because I actually dated a girl who was working in social media marketing, and she told me, get on all these platforms, get on Instagram, get on Twitter, get all of these accounts and promote yourself. And I was just thinking, what am I going to do? Post pictures of the food like everybody else? Or like, it didn't make any sense to me. So I was stubborn for a very long time. And then I started posting eventually videos. We were broken up at that point already, so I came to this realization later on. I started posting practice videos, basically, of me just playing for, back then it was 15 seconds on Instagram. Now it's a whole minute that you get of show time.
That's right.
And some of them really picked up. They got shared by the violin channels, Classic FM, all these big outlets for classical music. And I thought, okay, maybe I have something here. So I kept going at it. It was the Tchaikovsky concerto that was mainly actually practicing because I had a backing track of the orchestra part, which is of course great.
Okay.
It kind of suggests itself to be done as a practice video immediately. So I kept doing that, and like in 1 minute bits and pieces, I basically shared the whole concerto, one could say. And that grew my following tremendously.
But did you even have any awareness of what that means to be one of these so-called social media influencers? That you're not just, was that an uncomfortable thing for you, that you're not just projecting your art, but you are really projecting a lifestyle that people will tap into? Because you post other things, for example, your workouts, that's a part of your routine and your balance.
Non-classical musician kind of thing also, yeah.
Exactly, and does that factor in? You were also working as a model on and off, and how do you see all of that fitting in? I see that lots of young musicians are really trying to design a persona. That's what I'm getting at.
I think one should just be 100% real. I mean, I enjoy working out. the fashion thing sort of happened in my life just because I was in New York and I ran into the people and I signed with agencies and I did those jobs. But it was always about the music for me, mainly. And yes, fitness is something that interests me, that I'm very much into, but number one is always the music. And it's always been, and that's what it's always going to be. So I feel like it's hard to fake something like that because, yeah, you cannot sustain it, and it's not believable.
But are you ever maybe afraid that people who are not used to having a classical musician do such diverse and interesting things, and being a model, do you think that there might be some resentments, or they might take you less seriously?
Absolutely. I mean, that's always going to happen. I feel like that's kind of a problem with the classical audience these days. I feel like there is such a resentment towards anything that goes outside of being the stereotypical classical musician who is just who walks out of the practice room confused and just lost, kind of. That's kind of the idea, that the kind of removed from the world kind of classical musician. You know, it's not really the whole mainstream culture. It's not. I mean, classical music is not part of the mainstream culture, is what I'm saying. And people do take almost offense in that. Like, especially when I post something from the gym or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, you are going to experience lots of hate on social media sometimes as well. But it's always nice to see when your friends kind of start attacking those people again on behalf of you. So it's nice to watch this, and there is support from many people as well. But obviously, there's lots of hate too. Haters gonna hate what they're gonna do.
Well, I'm somewhat curious about this subject because I've never really thought about. Okay, if you look at the distinction with performers, the females, I see a lot of backlash if the female performer happens to be, in the eyes of some audience members, to be too attractive, then they can't possibly also be taking their art seriously.
Right.
I didn't possibly consider that could also be the case for men.
I think it's pretty much even playing field at this point when it comes to that. Yeah, and it's sad, but I mean, is this the way it is? And I don't think one can really push too much for the whole fashion thing if you want to be taken seriously. But then again, who cares in a way? You have to be yourself, and if they don't like it, they were not your audience to begin with in that case. So it's hard. I mean, you shouldn't be trying to please anybody. Just do what you want to do, and if you're doing it well, somebody's going to notice, and it's going to all work out in the end.
So I'm looking at the diversity of your projects these days. I notice you're touring around the world. You're playing concertos, you're playing recitals, but you're also doing diverse projects such as playing in prisons, in nursing homes, house recitals. How does this all factor in for you? Are you happier playing more in one setting than the other?
I think it's all about the variety as well. I was always involved in these kind of projects. Even when I was studying in Vienna, when I was 18, 19, I was part of the Yehudi Menu in Live Music Now Foundation, that's what it is. And that was actually about playing in prisons, nursing homes, and so forth. And then I sort of, when I was studying in New York, I took the concept to the next level, and I was thinking playing on the subway would be a great thing to bring music to people, especially Bach. Solo Bach is just such a tremendous experience, especially I feel like, which brings me back to the whole classical music culture being such an elitist world, that if you're not introduced to it as what it is, it's much easier to approach this music. Like if you don't expect classical music to happen now and let's all sit down and be silent for the next hour, it's much more direct somehow. It targets the people much more directly, I feel like.
Was your approach to Bach in the subway essentially different from Joshua Bell's experiment where he played, I guess it was for a couple of hours, and he made the story that no one paid attention? I somewhat proposed that was a little bit of an unfair premise.
It was rush hour.
It was rush hour, and we don't expect to take seriously something that's out of context. What was your feeling about the way you brought Bach to the subway?
It depends on, as I said, the timing, the location. I think also he was placed in the hallway where people just rush through to get to wherever they need to go. And I feel like the platform is actually the place where it's actually happening, because the people are sort of stuck there with you for 5 minutes at least until the next train arrives. And unless they put their headphones in, they are kind of, they have to listen. Yeah.
How did people react to that in that kind of setting? Did people listen? Did people say anything to you?
Oh, lots of people. Yeah, I actually met some great people through the subway. Actually, also, there was this one cafe in the Lower East Side where I live around the corner from actually, and I became very good friends with the owners, and I sometimes would even play there for fun with my friends, and just a great sense of community sort of happened through that. But the reactions were very different. Obviously, lots of people just passed by, but there's plenty of people who actually even waited until, 2 trains would pass and they would still be listening. So they gave me business cards and so forth. Yeah.
I understand that you're also playing non-classical music. Tell me about that.
I am kind of getting into that these days. Yes, I feel like. It's a very interesting thing because I listen to all kinds of music, and I think it's important for a classical musician not to listen only to classical. You have to experience, I feel like the human emotions in music are always the same. It's about how you approach them, and I feel like other genres, let's say rock or EDM or something, those are the same emotions you can find in Beethoven. They're just kind of transmitted differently. So I listen personally to all kinds of stuff, and I feel like why shouldn't I explore that side as well? And so I'm working a lot on the computer with electronic music production and so forth, and I'm going to be releasing a project soon. So yeah.
What do you say to the people who either find that surprising or they might even tell you, why are you wasting your time with that other stuff?
Again, it's discrediting for the classical musician, yes.
Yes.
That's the common perception, unfortunately. But I just can't help doing what I enjoy doing, so that's not going to stop me, I feel like.
What about when you were in conservatory? Did you envision that you would have such a diverse platform, a diverse way of reaching different types of audiences?
No, not really. I was always very interested in all kinds of genres, and even at my graduation recital, I think there's a video of it, a buddy of mine filmed it on YouTube, of me playing Metallica electric violin as an encore after I played Franck Sonata, and Bach C major sonata. I played Metallica as an encore with my pianist Peter Vancevic, and yeah, it was fun. I was always very interested in exploring all kinds of genres. Yeah.
So I'm interested in exploring your world on stage. So I've seen numerous videos on YouTube of you as a child at different stages. Incredible performances, and each time, what interests me is you seemed absolutely in your element. It just seemed very composed, nonchalant. You deployed it, and it almost seemed like sometimes you knew you were deploying it well. Were you always in your element on stage? Was that your world?
I love playing on stage. It's been really the thing that I've always aspired to do. I started playing the violin when I was 7 or 8 years old, something like that. And immediately, I remember seeing one video of Jascha Heifetz playing, and that sold me. Like, for the rest of my life, this is what I want to do. And I just thought it was the most badass thing I've seen until that point. And actually, until now, pretty much. So, yeah, I just wanted to be that and try as hard as I can to reach that goal.
But for people who reach their peak performance on stage, I'm always fascinated. If it feels natural for them, how do they relate to the experience of performing? Because that is mostly not the case for me.
I wouldn't say that's the case for me either, to be honest. I feel like I sound the best in my practice room. But once you get on stage, it does get you get a certain kick, like an extra boost of energy, an extra boost of something special. And you don't get that in a practice room, I feel like. Even though it might feel worse, performing-wise, to me. But when I listen back to the recording, it has something extra, some sort of extra excitement that happens. And that's nice to see, that it's not as bad as I thought it was when I listened to the recording.
So at this point, now that you're out of school and you've performed around the world, what do you think is gained by the learning that you've done since then? Is it experience on stage? Is it having met people and diversified your projects? What is the learning that you've seen since then?
I think it's a combination of all of these things, but Also, I feel like it's also don't expect. I mean, it's not going to be what you expect. I feel like that's the one thing that I learned from this. You will you'll be doing so many other things as well, and you just see where life brings you. It's kind of I feel everything is just an improvisation, and eventually you will find your voice and where you see yourself.
We have a lot of viewers who are conservatory students, so they're looking at you. Okay, you're a model. You have played concerts all around the world.
Terrible. He's a model.
He's a model.
Yeah.
Okay, dismiss him. He's playing concertos with different orchestras around the world. He's a social media celebrity. How, how does a performer like you find motivation to practice on a daily basis between gigs where you might have a longer period? That is something that has actually been asked from some of our viewers. How do you self-motivate?
I mean, I feel like as a musician, you are such a critical person, especially, I mean, of your own playing, obviously. There is no perfect performance, and I think that's what we already spoke about. You always strive to get to that one perfect performance, and it's never going to happen, so I feel the motivation is there all the time. You never feel like you're ready. And that's, in a way, it's a bad thing, but in a way, it's a good thing as well.
Those conservatory students are still watching you and they're saying, I'm in school, what do I do next? What would you say to them?
Do as much as you can by yourself, because there's so many things these days you can do by yourself. That's self-promotion, that's social media. You can, actually what I did recently, I recorded a CD completely by myself, basically. I was talking to
Tchaikovsky album?
Tchaikovsky album, yes. That's my sales pitch right there.
There we go.
So the Tchaikovsky album, I did the whole thing myself, the orchestra.
Yeah, how did you get an orchestra involved?
The orchestra was, I got a great deal on this actually. I played in the Czech Republic. I recorded with them, and I need a conductor as well.
So you line up some sponsors, you present a vision.
It was self-funded basically, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you pulled that together. What does a recording session like that look like? Why the Tchaikovsky, first of all?
I didn't have much time. The recording session was I had 3 hours with the orchestra. That's why I could self-fund it, because I didn't have much time.
Just 3 hours?
3 hours, and there was a break in the middle as well of 20 minutes. So I had basically 2 hours and 40 minutes to record the whole thing, the whole Tchaikovsky concerto. And it was nerve-wracking in a way to record just in such a short time, but I pulled it together and I'm actually happy with the outcome.
Why the Tchaikovsky? I'm not a violinist, but I think that's probably the most difficult violin concerto, or one of them.
It's a very athletic piece. It's definitely, you feel exhausted once you play it. But I feel like it's also one of the big staples in the violin repertoire, so I just wanted to have that covered. I love the concerto. I've been playing it for many years, and I felt like recording this is kind of like a must. So it's a staple, and then I thought, what else can I throw into the whole mix? And Souvenir dans le Cher, beautiful piece with piano, and I figured that's going to complete it and make it a kind of nice package.
At your age, recording the Tchaikovsky concerto, and of course there are so many different great violinists from posterity, what was going through your mind as you were playing, saying, do I have something new to say? Can I measure up to those other versions that I've heard while growing up? Did any of that enter into your mind? Or this is just your personal statement, you said, maybe I'm ready to do this now? You see how I overthink things?
Yes, well, I didn't think about
you.
it actually. I mean, obviously, you grew up with your heroes, listening to those recordings, and obviously that influences you as well. But I feel like eventually you will find your own things, and the more you perform it, the more you are confident about what you're trying to say with the piece. And you don't really look left or right anymore. You just do your own thing and your own version. And I think that's ultimately the mindset where one should be, where you don't question it anymore, and you just think this is the way to go. Mm-hmm. And yeah, in a way you have to think that your version is the best almost. You have to convince yourself that what you're doing is the right thing to do, because otherwise you would go crazy and you would never make a statement.
Which is more difficult for you, the criticism of others or the criticism of yourself?
Of myself, definitely, yeah.
How much of that do you have to deal with?
All the time. I mean, every day when I practice, that's what you question it all the time, what you're doing. and yeah, you have to just power through and get better in order to eradicate any kind of doubt.
What about silencing that line of thinking on stage? What's going through your mind when you've reached your peak performance?
You mean in the actual performance?
In the actual
or?
performance, where is your attention focused on? I'm always curious to know the process of different performers who are comfortable on stage.
Yeah. I mean, comfortable, there are more comfortable places than on stage, obviously, in life. But it depends also on the performance, I feel like. Sometimes it's really just the music. But it does happen, I will admit that your mind starts wandering around and you just start thinking completely of other things sometimes, and you have to kind of get yourself back. Especially later in the performance, I feel like your mind starts. Actually, no. It depends. At the beginning, sometimes it's even like this. That actually, at the beginning, I feel like it's kind of getting comfortable and getting set on stage, and then usually by the second, third movement or something, you get more comfortable, more confident. But the first piece is always the most difficult one for me, at least.
Yes, I sometimes
The encore, great. I'm having a blast. But first piece, yeah.
Is that because you feel like you're having to prove something?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Mostly to myself, and that's the problem.
Also, for me, another thing that I notice at certain junctures, that I notice that the audience is really listening, and then I'm listening better myself as a result of them being.
That's so inspiring, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Do you find that audiences are listening differently in different countries?
Yes. Yeah. There's definitely some audiences that are more into it, I would say, almost. I mean, I've had it where people just talk and answer their cell phones even. I mean, there are countries like that, not going to specify, but yes.
Right. Would you attribute that to certain countries having less of a established tradition of going to classical music concerts?
Possibly. I don't know. It's a tough question. I didn't think about why that is, actually. But probably, yes.
And then how do you handle yourself when such a thing happens? The phone goes off and someone actually answers it. Do you continue
the
playing?
funny thing is somebody actually told me that the phone was going off. I didn't realize that because I don't even notice it. I heard it later in the recording that there were people talking and chatting. There was a baby crying somewhere and somebody answered their phone. And I honestly didn't notice these things. I never noticed what's going on in the audience because I'm just playing. I'm busy doing my job, basically.
In your view, going back to the perceptions of conservatory students who want to be in your shoes now, they're looking at what you've done and they're wondering, okay, I want to do those things too, but in the meantime, how do I make a living to bridge myself to that point where I can pull those things off? The travels. Did you have to get a teaching job? Did you have to do this or that?
Yes.
Sort of a day job,
yeah,
as it were.
it was always music related in my case. I mean, yes, there was some modeling on the side, but honestly, it wasn't financially that much. So it was always about the music. It was either, I had a teaching job actually for half a year, but I'm not much of a teacher, to be honest. So I just don't enjoy it so much. It's not that I don't think I'm bad at it, but I just don't enjoy it so much. I prefer actually playing and being in the action. I feel like it's kind of the life of a freelance musician in New York. You have to do so many things. You will do weddings, you will do funerals, you will do all kinds of events, fashion shows. There's so many things you see and you do in New York. And there's always work. I realized also. If you show up on time and you do your job well, people are going to call you back, and it's all going to work out somehow.
Okay, so
I'm a hopeless optimist, yeah.
Probably, my guess is, having done things that at first might seem unrelated, like being a model or having workout videos, perhaps you even got concert opportunities from those
Quite
types
possibly.
of
I
things.
mean, I'm definitely not your general stereotype of a classical musician, so I feel like maybe if people are open to it and are thinking of somebody else, then yeah, I'm probably also in a market of my own in a way. So that's a good thing, to differentiate yourself. And I feel like actually social media has helped through that a lot, just bookings and concerts, and I've been called to festivals just based on social media, which is incredible, I think, still.
Is it difficult to get a sense of the people you're relating to, knowing that you have this huge online following of mostly invisible people?
Yes.
Do you get a sense of who they are? Are there advantages to that, disadvantages? There are probably people who are falling in love with you and you don't know what to make of that. What's your sense of what you can put out there in terms of material about yourself, knowing that other people will receive
Yes.
it directly?
Right. I feel like it's in terms of who is following me and who my audience is, it's such a huge kind of it's all kinds of people. I feel like it's music students, obviously. There's lots of musicians, but it's also people who I feel like are not following maybe for the music. They're just following for, I don't know, some gym stuff or workouts or some fashion-y bits. I don't know. I feel like whatever gets the people to listen to the music, I feel like in a way, I do all these different things, but eventually it's all about trying to channel them to the music. Yeah.
Filip, it was such a pleasure to have you back on the show and to have the update for the first time on our show, to see where one of our guests has come, particularly with your incredible trajectory.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and much
Thank you
luck
so
to you.
much. Yes, you
Thanks.
too.
Awesome. It was fun.
Yes.